We are on to our third method for how to pick a winner in a preference ballot election, so where you're ranking all of your voters. So we've looked at plurality and then plurality with runoff. What we've seen, plurality with runoff started to take into account this idea of ranking, but it didn't necessarily take a full rank into account. So we're going to learn another method called the Borda count method. Borda is the last name of the guy who invented this, and then it's a count method because this one's actually a point method. So we're going to count up points. So what we're going to do is we're going to award various points. So we're going to start off at the bottom of the list, and we're going to award 0 points to last choice vote. So if you're at the bottom of the ballot, no points. And then we'll go up from there. 1 point for next to last, and then once you're one higher than that, 2 points for whoever's next. And you just keep going for, it depends on how many choices, how many candidates there were. But start at 0 on the bottom and then keep going up from there. And then what we're going to do is just total all of the points. And the candidate with the most points wins. So we're going to tally and count up all of those points. One thing to be really careful of, it's a common mistake with this method, is to forget to take into account how many votes each column of ballots represents. Essentially, what it would look like normally, before we've grouped them, is every single ballot would have points tallied, and so for every identical ballot you would get those points for all of the different candidates. So let's give it an example in this pizza example. So I've left our table up here again of that pizza example, and we want to know in this example which topping wins with the Borda count method. So what I like to do with this method is add a last little thing over here where I keep track of, well, first just write down what would the point totals for this example be. So again, start at last choice. You give 0 points for last choice and then go up from there. So in this one, fourth choice is worth 0 points. Third is worth 1 point. Second choice then ends up being worth 2 points. And first choice ends up being worth 3 points. You're always going to go 0 through 1 less than the number of candidates that you have, is how it's always going to work out. So then what we need to do is tally all of these up. So what I personally like to do to keep track of it is I like to just do each candidate on here. So we could have like anchovies, sausage, mushrooms, and pepperoni, say. And we could do them in any order that we want. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go column by column and set up these points. So let's keep track of anchovies first. So let's look at the first column of ballots. Anchovies is top of the list on that set of ballots. So being in first choice means that you get 3 points. So anchovies is getting 3 points, but remember there's more than one ballot in that column. So that column actually represents 7 ballots. So they're getting 3 points 7 times. So we really need 3 times 7. Now we look at the next column and we see, well, now they're in the fourth choice in the second column. So that's worth 0 points. And that column represents 5 ballots. So they have 0 points times 5. Next column, again, they have fourth choice, which is worth 0 points. And that column is worth 4 ballots, so 4 different times they got 0 points. And then they're also last in the final column, which is worth 2 different ballots. So then what we would do is we would count all of that up. You can use a calculator to do it however you want to do it. But if we count all that up, we would get 21. So what we're counting up here, those are points. They got 21 points. Let's do sausage. So then sausage here is in second place in the first column. Second place is worth 2 points. So they got 2 points times, how many ballots was that? It's 7. So 7 different voters put them on top. So they get 2 times 7. In the second column, they're in first choice. So they get 3 points, but for each of the 5 ballots, so 3 times 5, In the third column, they're in second choice, which gives them 2 points. So then they've got 2 points, but that's worth 4 ballots. So really they get 4 different times. And then they're in third choice on the last column, which is worth 1 point, but that happened 2 times. So they got 1 point for the first person who voted that way and 1 point for the second person who voted that way. If you type all that in a calculator and do the multiplications and add them up, you end up with 39. Let's try mushrooms. In the first column, mushrooms is in third choice, which is worth 1 point. And there were 7 voters who voted that way. Then they're in third choice again, so another 1 point times 5. And then they're in third again, so another 1 point times 4. And then they're in second choice, which in this example is worth 2 points. And that's times those 2 votes. So if we tally all those up, we should get 28. And then for pepperoni is last. We've got in the first column, they are in last place. So they get 0 points times those 7 ballots. Then they get 2 points times 5. And they get 3 points times 4. And then they get 3 points times 2. Which adds up to a total of 20 points. And then we'll just look at who has the most. So who has the most points? Well, the most points would be 39. So S wins with the most points, which was 39 in this example. So this is a cool method where it actually really takes into account the full preference ballot of the different groups of people. There are still lots of pros and cons to this method. There can be weird things that happen. For instance, it is possible in this example that we saw with like plurality with runoff and plurality, we were really interested in this idea of majority. Like if someone gets a majority of first choice votes, they're a pretty good candidate and we should maybe declare them the winner. We're going to talk about that later in the class, but it is possible with board account that there could be such a candidate and they'll lose. They don't win the board account method, which is really interesting. So we'll see that. That's actually going to be in our next section, so section 14.2. But what we've got then with this is people do tend to enjoy it though because it does kind of take into account everywhere that things show up. So what we see is the one that won, sausage, yeah, it's not necessarily the highest on everybody's ballot. Like pepperoni was higher on was first choice on more people's ballots. But sausage is kind of always somewhere in the middle. Like board account kind of always elects a candidate that everybody is okay with. Maybe they're not super excited, so maybe no one is really just ecstatic that was the winner, but they're likely also not really upset that was the winner. So you kind of find this good ballot, this good candidate of who's going to end up winning. So this is the board account method. So again, one of the key things to remember is something like when we were counting up sausage, right? You look for how many points did they get, for what position were they at, and multiply by how many votes were in that column. So we'll try other examples on our worksheets, but this is what our first example to learn, the board account method. So now we've got one more method to learn.